Okay. Welcome, members, and to our gallery, to the meeting of the City of Prospect Assessment Panel of the 15th of June. We have two items to determine at this meeting. Now, for the benefit of the gallery, we have, for this meeting, we have an apology for Councillor Robin Pearce, but we do have a quorum, and we have present. Our members who are present are Ruan Pereira, David Cook, Rob Gargetti, and myself.
Julian.
Now, we also have one deputy independent member, Julian Rutt, who will participate in determining the matter of the first item, 6.1, because our other member, Rob Gargetti, has a conflict of interest with that item, okay? So at the appropriate time, Rob will step out of the meeting and Julian will step into the meeting to determine that, help us determine that one item. Now, we also have a number of representatives to be heard tonight on item 6.1, and they will have due course to outline their concerns. Please be aware that we have all viewed the site of the land in question and we have all read your written submissions. The panel normally would hear representatives on category 2 and 3 matters. We also have, for this item 6.1, submissions made by people who we would not normally hear from. So for the benefit of those people, and there are 3 people who have wished to be heard on that matter, the panel will need to determine firstly as to whether we will hear you or not. All representatives, all those people who we've determined to be heard, will have 5 minutes in which to outline their concerns. The applicant will then have likewise 5 minutes in which to respond to those concerns. Each of those people we may have questions of you at the appropriate time, in which we would like you to take your time and respond to the concerns or the queries we have to help us clarify the application before us. Okay? We may also ask questions of staff as a panel, and then we will deliberate on those matters without recourse back to applicants or representatives. Now, before I start the formal procedures, the panel acknowledges that we are on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains region, and we pay our respect to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationships with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. Okay. Now, in terms of procedures, we have no one on leave, but we do have, as I've mentioned, an apology from Councillor Robin Pearce. We do need to also confirm the minutes of the panel meeting held on the 11th of May. Is there someone who'd like to move and second that?
Happy to move, Chair.
Rob, thank you for that. Seconder, please. Ruan, you're happy to second? I can't. Yep, okay. Now, I can't see David on screen as well. Scott, can we do that so that I can then see? Okay. Oh, hello, David. All right, so now for the members, can I have a show of hand that those minutes have been confirmed? Right, thank you. Now, before we enter into 6.1, as I've also mentioned, we have Rob, you wish to declare a conflict of interest in terms of item 6.1?
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. The company, the planning consultancy that's representing the client on that one is the company that I work for, so I'll be stepping out for that item.
Okay. Thank you. So Scott will now exclude you from the meeting, and we would welcome Julian. Are you? Oh, hello, Julian. Hi.
Hi, Don, I'm here.
Hi. Okay, now, before we get to hearing representatives, let's determine, the panel members, let's determine if we are going to hear 3 submissions from people who would normally not have, under our meeting procedures, the ability to speak to this matter. You certainly have their written correspondence and the like in the agenda, and likewise the applicant has received that information. Now, members, I'll go first. My preferred position would be not to hear people who aren't normally enabled to speak under the legislation or our meeting procedures. We aren't a representative body as the council. We are here to determine matters under the Act and various procedures we have in place. So my preference would be not to hear them, but I'm certainly open to a majority view as to what the panel wishes to do. Rowan, do you want to go first as to whether you wish to hear them or not?
Yes,
Sorry, Rowan, you're just too blurred. We can't hear you. I don't know other people.
Yeah,
Can you try again?
I'm happy to hear them.
Okay, you're happy to hear them, right? David?
Yeah, look, I'd actually take a similar view to yourself, presiding member.
Oh, yep. So, sorry, your position would be not to hear them?
Correct.
Right, okay. Julian, what's your position?
Look, normally I'm actually feeling a little bit on the fence with this one into whether we hear them or not. I was happy to sort of go what the overall group was, given that, I think previously we've had a bit of a mix of whether we hear them or not. In this case, I think it's probably a little bit less likely that, that we wouldn't perhaps hear them based on previous meetings, having been one for about 6 months. So.
Okay, sorry, Julian, I'm not clear. Which side of the fence are you going on? Hearing or not hearing?
Probably, in this case, probably not hearing.
Right, okay. Right. Okay. So we have a majority view of not to hear those 3 representatives. I think it might be best, submissions, sorry. It might be best if we move something formally to that end.
Yeah.
Okay. So can I'm happy to move that we do not hear those 3 submissions because of our meeting procedures and the like. Is there a seconder for that, please?
Happy to second that, Chair.
David? Okay. Can I have a show of hands in support of that motion? 1, 2, 3. Those against? You want to show?
I'll abstain. Is that possible?
No, I'm not sure that we have an abstaining position. So you're either for. Okay, so we have it's 3-1 that will not be hearing those submissions. Okay, now let's move on to the representatives. I have listed G. Churchill. Is no one there? Now, and I also have a Parsons. I take it, Chris Parsons, you're wishing to be heard. Hello, good evening. Chris, you have 5 minutes in which to outline your concerns. As I've mentioned, we have your written statements as well, and we've seen the site. So please commence.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
I can, yes.
Okay, thanks. Oh, so I won't really go over what I wrote in the comments. You know, we've met with Lance and Chris. They've come over to our house and we've had a chat to them. They've been respectful, and we've respectfully said to them, we don't really want your petrol station. But, you know, we understand that businesses are here to make money. You know, my overall view is there's no benefit to this community whatsoever in having a petrol station on this street. We have 3 nearby. To be a really good development, there should be a benefit to the business and there should be a benefit to the residents. And those of us who set up shop here a long time ago, there is no benefit to us whatsoever. I appreciate they've probably dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, but for our street, it's just going to be a negative for our street. It will reduce the enjoyment of our properties. It's going to bring traffic issues. It's going to bring more people into our street. Ellen Street is not a wide street anyway. We have traffic issues at the best of times, and this is just going to add to it. I mean, other than that, we live right next door to where the petrol station or the storage shed is going to be. We bought here 13 years ago. The storage shed was basically just a storage shed. It was very rarely used. When it was used, Holden's used it from the western side. If there is going to be any use, I appreciate that it's going to be locked up, you know, after hours. But if there is going to be any use, it's going to be used right next to my house, basically, which is going to add noise. Once this goes through, no one can really stop anything. If there's a problem in our street, all we can do is ring the police, and they've got better things to worry about. So our major issue is, the chances are it's going to go ahead. Our major issues are the 24-hour nature of it. I have no idea why we need a petrol station for 24 hours. The one that's across the road, they don't operate for 24 hours. The extra traffic down our street, I think thought should be put into how that is going to be controlled before I have to start ringing people because there's traffic blockages on our street. Because there's really nothing the council can do about that except put in protections up front. Unfortunately, we'll be left in a position where we're going to have to deal with it as residents after the fact. Across the road's an old folks home. They've already had. Sorry, did someone say something? Sorry.
No, keep going, Chris.
Okay, you know, across the road's the old folks home. They've already had trouble. You know, people are breaking in all the time, and all this is just going to add to traffic down our street. In terms of the property itself, we spoke to Chris and Lance about the air, how they pump up their tyres. You know, how noisy those things are. They've sort of made some representations about they can reduce the sound or they can use extra blockages to put that off. But I mean, basically that's about 10, 15 metres away from where the old folks home is in our house. So we're probably not too keen on having that operating 24 hours a day. Then, you know, use of 8 Ellen Street, we're obviously worried about that because that is right next door to where I live. And like I said, it's always just pretty much been a storage shed, and Holden's did use it, but they only ever accessed it from the western side. And now there's no opportunity for that to happen because obviously there's going to be the petrol station on the western side. So, you know, on an ongoing basis, that's going to be a concern for us because it's pretty much right next door to our house. I don't really have much to add, guys, other than, you know, I just think for a development, there should be a benefit to everyone, to the business and to the residents. And there's no benefit to our residents of Nailsworth whatsoever for this petrol station. Not that I have any issue with the business people because I met them and they're all good blokes.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Are there any members of Chris? Any questions by members of Chris? No? Chris, just one question of you.
Yes.
When you talk about this traffic, additional traffic impacting on your street,
Yeah.
are you saying that this will attract cars down your street once they leave the service station or come using your street to cut to the service station? What are you actually predicting?
Well, there's 2 things. People can go to the petrol station. Now, when there is a fuel war on, which tends to happen on the other two petrol stations, if you go down, I forget the name of the streets, there's Newbon and Polsford Road and Main North Road, we can have traffic blocked up. I mean, sometimes on Main North Road, the traffic is blocked up for 60, 70 metres because the Mobil across the road and the Caltex or Woolworths petrol station are having a price war. Then they block up on Polsford Street. And then because they've got nowhere to go, when they're leaving, they go down Newbon Street. Newbon Street just pushes traffic into Ellen Street because it goes around and down Ellen Street. Now, when people are buying fuel, they're going to be accessing this petrol station either on Main North Road or they're coming up Ellen Street. It is the only way you can access the petrol station. So, you know, if there's a bit of a price war going on, they're either banking up on Main North Road or they're going to be banking up on our street out front of my house because we're right next door to this petrol station. We've seen it happen and it's going to happen again because they're there to make money. You know, they want people using their services. So cars are either going to, if they're buying petrol on Main North Road and then they want to get to North East Road, they come down our streets. They'll go down our street, they head up to Galway Avenue. Galway Avenue, there used to be streets that they could access behind Galway Avenue to get to North East Road, and the councils blocked them off because there was bucket loads of traffic getting down there. So they're now stopping people going around the back streets.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
I know your concerns now. Thank you. Now, Scott, is G. Churchill online or anything? No, not that I could see.
Nor I don't.
No. Okay. Right. We'll call forward the applicant. Now, I notice, Lance, you're the applicant, and Chris, Kerry, you're the consultant. Are you both speaking, or Chris, are you it?
Hi, panel. Thank you. Yes, the intention is that I will speak on behalf of the applicant. Yes.
Okay. You'd like to commence?
Sure. Thank you. Just as a point, though, Lance Mayer, who represents Adelaide nominees, is also available if there are any specific questions for him. But otherwise, I'll happy to talk. Thanks for the opportunity to address the panel, and thanks to Mr. Parsons for his response and also for his time out on site. We do appreciate that, and we do understand his position. Obviously, you've had the panel's had the opportunity to review our response. I don't intend to go over everything. I'd just like to touch on the main points that have been brought up by Mr. Parsons there, if I could. I think it's important to preface that certainly with commercial development close to residential areas and petrol filling stations, indeed, there is quite often a community perception of concern, be it from an amenity perspective or environmental perspective. But I think it's important to emphasise that this is a proposal for a contemporary facility that's been designed to mitigate many of the impacts that are of being concerns to the representors. So in terms of, I guess the point in terms of benefit to the community, I'd like to deal with that essentially as a land use question. I think our report and certainly the council staff proposed uses, the petrol filling station and the service and the store are envisaged and expected uses within the business policy area. So on that point, we think the land uses are entirely appropriate. Petrol filling stations on a site on an arterial road, it's appropriately located to be serviced by fuel trucks and by members of the public, and we anticipate that most of the movements will occur via Main North Road, although there will be some impacts to Ellen Street, although that's predicted to be relatively low. In terms of the store, Mr. Parsons touched on it. It's an existing building, it's already there. The land use that's before you is a relatively benign use, especially when you compare it to other envisaged uses within the business policy area. And we believe that we are proposing reasonable days and hours of operation, daytime, Monday to Friday. So in terms of an actual interface, we think that the store is entirely appropriate. And it's also important to point out that the store and the petrol filling station are entirely separate land uses, that they're not linked in any way, shape or form. there's been concerns with the 24-hour operations, and that sort of extends across issues of noise, security. They were certainly mentioned by Mr. Parsons there. Again, we'd like to reinforce that this site has been designed in consultation with Sonus acoustic engineers, who've assessed the development and designed the development to ensure that there are no unreasonable noise impacts and that the site will achieve compliance with the noise policy. In our view, 24-hour operations will in fact actually improve the present situation. It will increase people presence to the area. There will be CCTV installed. There will be improved lighting, and in our view, 24-hour use within an urban corridor zone, given that it's already happening in the area, is entirely appropriate. In terms of traffic concerns, again, the application has been designed and assessed in consultation with traffic engineers, in this case, Circa traffic consultants. They've reviewed parking, access, on-site manoeuvring, and it's all been found to be satisfactory and appropriate in achieving the relevant standards. And that's been signed off in terms of the review by Deputy Traffic as well. As I mentioned, the traffic volumes on Ellen Street are anticipated to be relatively low, and I think that's been well reflected in the council report as well in terms of existing traffic volumes. Mr. Parsons touched on the amendments that we've made to the air and pressure unit, and again, Sonus are comfortable that that will deal with any perceived noise concerns. So that relates to fitting the system with a variable volume control and establishing a barrier around the system. We did also agree, and it is in the staff report, that existing bollards to the driveway of the store will be retained as well, and that will prevent unauthorised access to the site, the store site outside of hours, which was a concern to Mr. Parsons. Now, we know that doesn't address all of his concerns, but we believe that will significantly improve the situation. That's really all I want to cover off on, panel. Thank you for your time. Before I finish, I would like to point out that there is one recommended condition of consent that we would like to discuss if the panel is inclined to grant consent to this matter, and perhaps we can discuss that in due course. So thank you, panel.
Well, Chris, what condition is that?
Chair, it's condition number 3 in relation to service deliveries. In our view, and sorry, I'll just bring it up now so I'm not misquoting. In our view, that condition reads that all service movements should be restricted, and that would include fuel deliveries. And it certainly was not an intent of the application for that to occur. Fuel deliveries are proposed 24 hours, and that was formed part of the Sonus noise assessment. So fuel deliveries can occur during nighttime hours and still achieve the noise policy criterion. So in our view, there should be a distinction between other service vehicle movements, fuel deliveries, and waste collection. And I've got some suggested wording if the panel's so inclined.
Thank you. Members, any questions of the applicant?
Probably like to hear what that rewording of that condition might be.
Sorry, hang on, Ruan. Sorry, you're coming across very unclear.
Sorry about that. I'd like to hear what the rewording of that condition might be.
Sorry, I think, are you asking for me to read the reworded conditions?
Yes, please.
Yep,
What's the intent that you would be after, Chris?
Okay, so my suggestion is that essentially it be split into 3 conditions. The first being service vehicle movements, with the exception of fuel deliveries and waste collection, shall occur outside of the peak periods associated with the use approved herein, and in any event shall not occur before 7 AM or after 10 PM on any day. That would be condition 1. Condition 2 would be fuel deliveries shall occur outside of the peak periods associated with the use approved herein, and that's the end of that condition. And then a separate condition for waste collection. As per the current report, waste collection shall occur outside of the peak periods associated with the use approved herein, and in any event shall not occur before 7 AM or after 7 PM on any day.
So why are you suggesting 7 to 7?
So the waste collection condition, that 7 to 7 is in line with the environmental protection noise policy, so we're comfortable with that.
Okay. Yep. Okay, thank you. Rowan, any other question?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have a question? David or Julian? No?
No.
Okay, thank you, Chris. We'll now
Thank you.
open it up for discussion. Scott, in terms of your approach here, in terms of the land uses and the like, in the past, we've gone through this legal question of service stations being some form of integrated type of land use. Here we seem to be saying it's a petrol filling station, a shop and a store. I accept that the store now is a separate use, but your approach, why has that moved away from what the courts seem to be saying about integrated establishments of this nature?
Sure. So the case law for the court has typically, and without mentioning the name of the branding, involved a particular branding of a petrol filling station that has had car wash, fast food style restaurants, dog vacuuming and washing, and a range of perhaps 5 or 6 different activities happening that all share kind of common spaces within forecourts or buildings or so forth.
Right.
The case law is, I think, less clear when it comes to a matter such as this one, which is a kind of small convenience control building associated with a petrol filling use, and there's no separate kind of common use of those spaces. There has also subsequently been case law about the way that uses within a mixed-use application need to be managed in terms of categorising separately the petrol filling station and shop, even if we took the view that it was an integrated facility. So procedurally, there's no difference between the two. And because it's more ambiguous as to whether this would be viewed as an integrated facility, I have moved with it in a way that I thought best explained the uses.
Thank you. Thank you. And while we're at that, the suggested conditions, any comment you'd like to make on that? And that's not preempting the decision of the panel, but just getting in early as to discussion.
With respect to the format of the condition, we have been repeatedly asked through the court as part of consent orders to pull related conditions together into single larger conditions rather than separate ones. I don't have a personal professional view as to whether we should or shouldn't do that, but we have adopted that type of approach on the basis of feedback from previous commissioners. As to otherwise, the suggestion, the acoustic report does address the issue, and I think panel members could make a decision in line around the 3 streams of noise, whether it be one condition.
Okay. But you have no strong objection in terms of what is being put. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of Scott or Darren? Rowan, any questions?
Not from me.
No? Okay. Okay, David or Julian, any questions of staff? No. Okay. So can I open it up for discussion? Rowan, would you like to go first?
Well, I was happy to move in support of it with the variation to the condition. I thought that was a logical separation of the traffic.
Sorry, Rowan, just hold on. I'm having trouble hearing what Rowan is, or understanding what Rowan is saying. What are the other members hearing? David, Julian, is it clear?
No, not really.
No.
Yeah, not at all.
Okay.
Ryan, type his comments into the chat box and then you can read them out.
Absolutely.
It's probably the way to go.
Okay, Rowan, there's been a suggestion that you might quickly type your comments in the chat box and then staff could read them out. Because we can't understand what is being said.
No worries.
Shall we move on to other? How about while you're doing that, Julian, any comments you'd like to make?
Sure. Yeah. Look, I actually thought it was quite a reasonable proposal for that site and the position. We often hear of fears of increased antisocial activity, but proposals like this being raised by sort of nearby residents. When in reality, I think the increased level of passive surveillance through the activity on site tends to have the opposite effect. I also noted there were conflicting comments from representatives regarding the oversupply of service stations locally, versus also queuing of customers at nearby service stations, indicating there's perhaps not quite as clear cut as that. But regardless, I was comfortable with the proposal as it was and happy to support the recommendation for approval. So,
thank you, David. Would you like to outline your views?
Yes, thank you, presiding member. Look, I too am ultimately supportive of the application. I certainly do appreciate the response from the representative that we heard, and I understand the position of the community. I'm sympathetic of the position of the community. I certainly appreciate that there is an appetite within the community for a different type of development, but ultimately, and from this panel, we can only assess, and council can only assess items against the development plan. And this type of development is supported by the development plan. And I actually think the overall, the detail in the report, the planning report by acoustics, and then the other technical consultants as well, particularly the acoustic and the traffic consultant, really do demonstrate that in terms of meeting the provisions of the development plan, this application meets them. So based against that, I am supportive of the application as it stands and supportive of the amended condition as Chris highlighted.
Thank you. While we're waiting for Ruan, Scott, another question I had. There's an inference in the provisions, particularly the building height, that the zone might be calling for a more substantial built form than a petrol filling station, and that there's a notion that this zone might be moving away from its current nature to more of a substantial residential business, those with much more density of development. Where do we put that notion in terms of the overall context that the zone is calling for? Could you maybe expand on that?
I confess it's an interesting question. But we made some commentary in the report, I think, around precisely this issue, which is that the zone talks to, for example, a minimum height of 2 stories, but then indicates in terms of anticipated uses, things like petrol filling stations, light industries, stores and warehouses that very rarely have 2-story built form. And I think the only way I can rationalise that difference is that there was an ongoing anticipation that those supporting service industry type of associated uses would still need to occur on Main North Road, and thus might be single-storey buildings, but generally other uses and other buildings should be 2 to 4 stories in height.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Ruan, how are we going with your...
Ruan's provided some comments to me here, John, and without putting any further words, Ruan's indicating that he's recommending in support, as David mentioned, in terms of that condition to be varied to provide for the 3 different streams of service vehicle traffic typologies.
Right, okay. Thank you, Ruan. And Ruan, are you happy to move that way? No one has actually spoken against the proposal, so I'm wondering if you... Oh, well, hang on. Let's go back a step. David and Julian, your position regarding condition 3. Ruan is supportive of, in effect, meeting the applicant's suggestion in terms of fuel deliveries being outside of the peak period, but occurring outside of that peak could be happening any time of the day, and that the remaining conditions of 3 or remain as is. I've got that right, Scott? Yes, okay. So, Julian and David, are you comfortable with that arrangement,
Yes.
right? Okay, people are either nodding or I've heard yes. So from that point of view, we have consensus to approve the development on the basis of condition 3 being slightly reworded in accordance with, generally in accordance with the suggestions put forward by the applicant. So on that basis, I'll declare that the matter has been given approval subject to that slight variation. So to Chris and anybody else who's online interested in this matter, the panel has agreed to grant consent to the development, and in due course, the council no doubt will be writing to you with outlining what the full conditions are and the like. Okay, thank you for your attendance. Members, and Julian, thank you for your participation. So we'll now move to item 6.2 and invite Rob back into the meeting. Is Rob there?
Yeah, it's back.
I'm back. Yep, no problems.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Okay, so item 6.2 is for two-story semi-detached dwellings at 32 Farrant Street, Prospect. We have no reps to be heard. Any questions of staff?
Through the chair, just one question, if I may.
Yep.
With we have a reserve matter in relation to a civil plan for that one.
Yeah.
But I just noticed that we've got a civil plan prepared, including calculations. So is it that they aren't accurate, or are we wanting more information?
Scott, do you want to respond to that?
In simple terms, it's more information. So really we're just wanting to, I guess those calculations indicate a pre and post development number, but don't clarify for us the assumptions on which those pre and post development numbers are formed. And there is storm events that the relevant provision anticipates will be managed through that pre and post arrangement. So I was just suggesting we use the reserve matter to tidy up that background assumption.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And Scott, in terms of this proposal, your report does touch on why I suppose site coverage is important in terms of a whole lot of benefits in terms of stormwater, water retention and the like. But then at the same time, you seem to be saying, but 60%, which this proposal is okay. Do you want to maybe touch on your reasoning for that, please?
Certainly, and I think for three members reading that section just in detail now, it's probably an expansion of paragraph 6.5.2 that I'll undertake here. But in essence, this applicant could, if they chose to exclude parts of the building from this application, lodge with us these dwellings at 50% site coverage, and then through a second separate application lodge a complying development application to us underneath the residential code process for those same features, because the residential code allows a 60% site coverage. There's a range of case law in place through which the court has said if somebody has the right through complying development to obtain the same outcome, you should give consideration to that in your assessment. Now, it need not absolutely determine in the positive.
Yeah.
For the purpose of our assessment, I've looked at some numbers as to what would happen if, for example, the rear al fresco was removed or a carport or garage were removed, which would still allow the proposal to meet these provisions, but then achieve a residential code complying development later. And so I think the number I have in here is that we'd be down around that 50% mark, and that's the reason why I'm satisfied with this outcome.
Thank you. Okay. Right. Rob, do you want to outline your views, please?
Yeah, sure. Look, I'm pretty comfortable to support the application in its current form. I think that the minor departure on there were two that I picked up from the report, site coverage and the building envelope plan. I think the site coverage, I mean, the way I look at that is from a point of view of, if it fundamentally meets your private open space and for the most part your setbacks, and doesn't have an adverse impact on neighbouring properties, then it's probably okay. So I'm reasonably comfortable with the site coverage exceedance, and also the frontages and the side areas, noting that they're a little bit under. I don't think it's going to alter the character to a point where it's going to detrimentally impact on the character. And the other one was the building envelope plan. Again, I think that minor encroachment into that side boundary setback, I just don't think it's going to be noticeable in all honesty, particularly taking into account the positions of the carports on that neighbouring property. So I'm happy to support the application in its current form.
Thank you. David, your views?
Yeah, look, I don't have too many dissimilar views to Rob's comments, actually. So, yeah, I'm happy to support the application.
Okay. Thank you. Ruan? No, Ruan's muted, is he?
I'm typing his comments in.
Oh, he's typing. Okay.
Everyone's briefly indicated in the chat here, Don, that he's supportive of the proposal.
Okay, thank you. So Ruan is supportive of the proposal as well. Okay, so we have a consensus that this application should be approved. And no one has raised the issue of the conditions, the reserved matter, but other than that, no one has raised that. So I'm presuming people are comfortable with that. So it be recorded that the panel has given a consent to this development in accordance with the recommendation. Okay, thanks, members. Now, in terms of information reports, 7.1. Darren, any
so this is 7.1. We've only got the one item, which is the Devonport Terrace Rail Corridor application, removal of trees. The update I have for that one is that I understand it will be shortly presented to the Minister for a decision. When we have confirmation of what that decision is, we'll come back to the members.
Okay, thank you. And let's move on to 8.1 then. Any?
Yep, so this, summary of appeals. Equally, we have one matter before the courts at the moment. This is an application that didn't come to the panel. It's an application through the courts to review an assessment decision by a delegated officer. We've had a preliminary conference today. It's likely to go to a directions hearing, so we'll keep members updated as that one goes through.
Thank you. Okay. Are we likely to be having a Zoom meeting next month?
So I think we've put in the agenda that we'll be planning to have a meeting in person. Right. That is dependent on exactly what things are, what restrictions are lifted. So, okay. Look, if we can have it, I think we'll come back to members and indicate a preference. Yep. If there's a solid preference to come back to a physical meeting, then that's what we'll do. Okay. So watch this space, I guess.
Okay. Is there any other general business members wish to raise with the panel? No? No. Okay. Thank you, members. I'll declare the meeting closed at 6:20. Hopefully we'll see each other next month. All the best.
That'd be good.
See ya.
Bye.